The hospital room whispered of stillness. Room 724, tucked away in a quiet corner of St. Augustine's Medical Center, had become more of a shrine than a place of healing. The blinds were half drawn, allowing slivers of late afternoon sun to paint golden lines across the sterile white walls. Machines hummed in rhythm, gentle beeps, soft pulses, like a mechanical lullaby refusing to give up on the woman lying beneath its watch. There she was, Olivia Wren, 32 years old, heiress to one of the largest tech empires on the East Coast. Once a woman who lit up Forbes magazine covers in executive boardrooms, now reduced to silence in tubes. For 6 long months, not a single twitch, not a single blink. And yet, here he stood, Dr. Aiden Lee, barely 30, a trauma resident who should have walked past her door like all the others. But he couldn't. There was something in her stillness that unsettled him, something in the way no one came to visit her anymore that clawed at his chest. She wasn't a case file. She was a person, a forgotten one. He rolled his sleeves, pulled on his gloves, and stared down at the stiff bandages wrapped too tightly around her chest. Bandages no one had touched in days because of paperwork, protocols, and fear. He muttered under his breath, "You deserve better than this." And with that, he reached for the scissors. The old bandages fell to the floor like peeling wallpaper, revealing pale skin marked by indentations, evidence of carelessness wrapped in sterile cloth. Aiden's hands trembled as he cleaned the area gently, warmth returning to the flesh beneath his touch. She looked too fragile for someone who once commanded billion-dollar boardrooms. 6 months, he whispered. 6 months and no one noticed you couldn't even take a full breath. Behind him, Nurse Margaret hovered, her disapproval thick as the antiseptic in the air. "Dr. Lee, this isn't just any patient. This is Olivia Wren. Do you know how many people would love to sue this hospital over a wrinkle in a blanket if it meant press time?" Aiden didn't answer. His focus was locked on Olivia's chest, no longer rising and falling in shallow, forced rhythm, but now gently expanding. The fresh bandages were looser, better, human. He exhaled just as the heart monitor let out a sharp beep. One beep, then another. Quicker this time, stronger. His heart skipped. Margaret's clipboard dropped with a clatter as numbers began to climb. 60, 65, 70 beats per minute. Aiden leaned forward, unsure if it was the monitor or his imagination. But then her chest moved, subtly, a hiccup of life. Her lips, parted ever so slightly, seemed to reach for something beyond the silence. "Olivia," he whispered. Nothing. But for a man who had spent too long staring at lifeless charts, even nothing looked like hope when the numbers danced. That night, while the city wept with winter rain and thunder rattled the windows, Aiden stayed. He sat in the glow of the machines, beside the woman who stirred in her silence. He didn't know it yet, but in breaking a rule, he had cracked something deeper, something neither medicine nor science could explain. And Olivia Wren, billionaire in a coma, had heard him. The corridor smelled like bleach and betrayal. Aiden's sneakers squeaked softly as he moved past the sleeping ward, his white coat flapping against his legs like a whisper of warning. The hospital at 2 a.m. was different, quieter, more honest. The lies didn't speak as loudly here. His thoughts hadn't stopped racing since Olivia's pulse spiked. It hadn't felt natural, not accidental. 6 months in a coma with pristine vitals, but no cognitive response. And then suddenly, life? It didn't make sense, unless it wasn't supposed to. Aiden turned down the hallway, his destination clear, the back supply room. Nurses rarely went there after hours, but he remembered something, an old intern's tale dismissed as paranoia, drugs going missing, files mysteriously amended. He reached the door and opened it quietly. Shelves lined the walls, saline, antibiotics, sterile gauze, everything labeled, documented, accounted for. Almost. He reached behind the gauze packs, behind the unlabeled painkillers used in rare surgeries, and found it. A vial, clear liquid. No label, just the faint residue of the black marker wiped clean. He stared at it, heart thumping like a drum in a dark forest. This didn't belong here. He slipped it into his pocket and quietly closed the door. Back in his office, he sat under the flickering lamp, the vial resting beside his laptop. He didn't know much about chemical analysis, but he knew someone who did. Jake, The lab tech owed him a favor, several actually. He dialed. Aiden, dude, it's 2 a.m. I need you to test something. Quietly, no logs, off the books. Jake groaned. This better not be urine. It's worse, Aiden muttered. There was a pause. Fine, bring it tomorrow. 2 days passed, then Jake called. You're going to want to sit down, he said. That stuff in the vial? It's a low-dose anesthetic, sophisticated. Not enough to knock someone out, but enough to keep them under. Quiet, unmoving. Aiden's fingers gripped the edge of his desk. Someone's been keeping her in that coma, Jake added. On purpose. Aiden's throat went dry. Someone had turned Olivia Wren into a sleeping doll, hidden behind monitors and clean sheets. And the worst part, he suspected he knew who. But he needed proof. Because if Olivia had been silenced, the question wasn't how. It was who and why. The hospital smelled of lavender disinfectant and secrets. Aiden stood outside the administrative wing, a manila folder tucked beneath his arm like a sword waiting to be drawn. Inside was the lab report Jake had sent, printed and highlighted, along with Olivia's vitals, time logs, and a grainy screenshot from the security camera outside ICU room 14. The figure in the image was clear. Daniel Wren. Olivia's brother, tailored suit, slicked back hair, and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. He had been Olivia's temporary proxy after the accident, running her companies, managing her estate, her public image, her everything. But now Aiden saw the pattern. Daniel visiting during off hours, staff schedules quietly shuffled, one nurse disappearing from rotation the day after a mystery vial appeared. Aiden's gut tightened. The betrayal wasn't just medical, it was personal, strategic. This wasn't about grief or fear. This was about power. And Olivia, she was the last thread keeping Daniel from complete control. He pushed through the glass doors into the executive lounge. Hospital brass sat at a sleek conference table, murmuring over budget reports and board approvals. Daniel sat at the head like a prince without a crown, his fingers laced beneath his chin. Aiden, Daniel said, eyebrows arched. I didn't realize we were expecting visitors. You weren't, Aiden replied, voice flat, but this won't take long. He slapped the folder onto the table. It landed with a satisfying thud. Pages spilled across polished mahogany, reports, timestamps, the vial image, a printed transcript from a whispered confession by a terrified nurse. Daniel's eyes didn't waver, but his fingers twitched. You've been poisoning your sister, Aiden said, his voice low and deliberate. You paid Jenny to keep her sedated so you could take over her empire. You thought no one would notice. A hushed ripple passed through the room. One of the board members coughed. Another leaned forward, squinting at the documents. Daniel stood slowly. His smile was still there, but thinner now, stretched like a mask starting to tear. You're playing with fire, doctor, he said, voice calm but cold. I'd be very careful what you accuse me of in front of these people. Oh, I'm not accusing, Aiden said, sliding a USB across the table. That's security footage from the night you handed the vial to Jenny. And this? He held up the final page. That's her written confession, signed, dated, ready for court. Daniel's jaw tightened. Aiden stepped closer. You made one mistake, he whispered. You underestimated how much I care about her. Daniel's gaze flickered. I'll bury you for this. You already tried, Aiden said, and she woke up. Silence. Then Daniel reached for his coat. I have nothing more to say without legal counsel. He brushed past Aiden, his shoulder grazing hard, sharp like ice. But Aiden didn't flinch. He had rattled the cage. Now he just had to protect what lay within it. Back in Olivia's room, the machines hummed softly. She was awake, sitting upright now, her eyes watching the door. When he entered, she tilted her head. You found something, she said. He nodded, and then he crossed the room, knelt beside her bed, and took her hand. I found everything. The sun bled gold through the blinds of room 14, casting long shadows across Olivia's blanket-covered legs. She looked stronger. Her posture was straighter now. Her eyes, once dulled by silence, now gleamed with defiance, and something softer when they found Aiden. He sat beside her, elbows on his knees, the manila folder resting on the side table like a loaded weapon. You were right, she said, her voice still hoarse but steady. It was him. Aiden didn't smile. Not yet. He used a sedative, short-term, low dose, just enough to keep you under without damaging your vitals. Subtle, cruel, he bribed a nurse, covered the logs. Olivia's gaze drifted to the ceiling, lips pressed into a thin line. He always hated that I ran things better than him. You didn't just run them better, Aiden said quietly. You built them. That scared him. Silence stretched between them like a fragile thread. I dreamt I was drowning, she whispered. Every night. Couldn't move, couldn't scream, just water everywhere. And then one night I felt something warm, like a hand. She turned to him. It was you, wasn't it? Aiden blinked, caught off guard. I changed your bandages. That was the night your vitals spiked. You didn't just touch my skin, she said. You found me. He swallowed hard, heart thudding like it had that very night. I never stopped talking to you, he admitted. Didn't know if it mattered. But I needed you to know someone was there. It mattered, Olivia said. Then she reached out, slowly, shakily, and laid her hand over his. A moment, then another. The air between them shifted, charged with something raw and undeniable. She squeezed his fingers. What happens now? Aiden exhaled slowly. Now we fight. Together. The courthouse loomed like a stone sentinel in the heart of Manhattan, its marble steps worn by decades of trials, verdicts, and buried secrets. But today, justice would not be buried. Olivia Nyan stood at the base of those steps, a simple black blazer hugging her frame. No flash, no jewelry, just quiet power in the way she held herself. Her cane tapped softly on the granite as she climbed, Aiden by her side, his hand steady on her elbow. Inside, the courtroom hummed with tension. Reporters lined the back wall, their pens poised, eyes hungry. Daniel Nyan sat across the aisle, his smirk lazy and confident, like a man who still believed his money could buy silence. He wore arrogance like a tailored suit. Aiden clenched his jaw behind Olivia, eyes locked on Daniel. But Olivia, she didn't blink. Her attorney, Rachel Kim, rose. Calm, precise. Your Honor, she said, turning toward the jury, this is not just a case of corporate fraud. It is attempted murder. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Olivia didn't flinch. Rachel presented the security footage, Daniel slipping the unmarked vial to the trembling nurse. The timestamp, the evidence, Olivia's medical records, the sedative, Jenny's audio confession, voice cracking under guilt. Daniel's lawyer objected. The judge waved it off. Then Rachel turned to Olivia. Would you please take the stand? Aiden felt his heart thud as she rose. Each step she took was deliberate. Her cane struck the floor like punctuation. Her voice, though raspy, rang through the courtroom with chilling clarity. I was kept in a coma for 6 months, Olivia said. Not because of the accident, but because someone wanted me quiet. She paused, looked straight at her brother. I built Niantech. From nothing. From dorm rooms and coffee shops and 70-hour weeks. He wanted it all, so he drugged me and left me in a hospital bed to rot. Daniel's face paled. For once, his smirk wavered. I heard the world around me, Olivia continued, and I heard Aiden Lee. He talked to me when no one else would. He reminded me I still mattered. She looked toward Aiden. Their eyes met. He saved my life. A wave of murmurs passed through the room like wind through dry grass. By the end of the session, the courtroom was silent, stunned, breathless. Daniel's lawyer stumbled through his defense, claiming stress, confusion, miscommunication. But no one was buying it. The evidence was overwhelming, the motive clear. When court adjourned for the day, Aiden guided Olivia past the cameras waiting like wolves outside. You were brilliant, he whispered, his hand brushing hers. She didn't smile, not yet. I wasn't finished, she said. The next morning, the courthouse was packed. Reporters jostled for space, their flashes crackling like lightning in a summer storm. Olivia and Aiden arrived quietly, hand in hand, their silence louder than the media frenzy surrounding them. Inside, tension hung thick in the air. The judge, stern and deliberate, read the verdict. We, the jury, find the defendant, Daniel Nyan, guilty on all counts. The rest was drowned out by the sound of Olivia's breath escaping her lips. Aiden felt her hand tremble in his. Her brother, her blood, had betrayed her, tried to erase her, and now justice was finally catching up to him. Daniel's face twisted in disbelief as the bailiff snapped the cuffs around his wrists. He turned once, eyes burning, not at the judge, not at the lawyer, but at Aiden. "I'll ruin you," he hissed under his breath. Aiden didn't flinch. He'd heard worse. But something in Daniel's tone, a chill slithered down his spine. As they exited the courtroom, Olivia's heels clicked softly against the marble. Cameras popped. Reporters shouted her name. She kept her chin up, proud, determined. Then Aiden saw it. In the crowd, a man pushed forward, broad shoulders, hoodie drawn low, something glinting in his hand. Too fast, too deliberate. "Olivia, down!" Aiden yelled. Time slowed. Olivia stumbled back. The man lunged. Aiden intercepted, his body colliding with the attackers. Pain shot through his arm as something sharp sliced through skin. He didn't stop. He drove the man to the ground. Security swarmed. Sirens blared. The crowd scattered in a panic. Aiden lay on the pavement, clutching his bleeding arm. Olivia dropped beside him, her hands trembling, pressing her scarf against the wound. "Aiden, no, no, stay with me," she cried, her voice cracking. "It's just a scratch," he murmured, forcing a shaky smile. But Olivia wasn't listening. She was crying, pressing harder, whispering promises to whoever would listen. Guam, fate, the wind. That she couldn't lose him. The world spun, the ambulance sirens wailed. Hours later, the news exploded across every screen in America. Attempted attack outside courthouse following Daniel Nyan's conviction. Hero doctor wounded while shielding tech heiress. Olivia sat beside Aiden's hospital bed, his hand in hers, eyes shut, bandages wrapped tight. Her cane rested forgotten against the wall. A tray of untouched food sat on the bedside table. She leaned forward, her lips near his ear. "You saved me again," she whispered, voice thick with tears. "And I'm not going anywhere." The studio lights were hot and blinding. Olivia sat in the center chair, a soft gray backdrop behind her. Across from her, a well-known news anchor flipped through notes, but all eyes were on the woman who had returned from silence, both medically and metaphorically. Olivia wore a simple cream sweater, no makeup beyond a touch of powder. Her hair fell in soft waves, not styled but natural. Her cane rested beside her chair. But what struck everyone watching at home wasn't her appearance. It was her gaze, calm, clear, unflinching. "We're live in 3, 2, 1. The red light blinked on. The anchor turned toward the camera, smiling professionally. "Tonight we speak with Olivia Nyan, the tech mogul who returned from a 6-month coma, survived betrayal, attempted murder, and is now fighting back." She turned to Olivia. "Ms. Nyan, thank you for being here." Olivia nodded. "Let's start at the beginning. You were in a coma after a car accident, but that wasn't the full truth, was it?" Olivia's voice was soft but steady. "No, I wasn't just injured, I was drugged, kept unconscious by someone I trusted." The anchor leaned in. "Your brother?" Olivia took a breath. "Yes, Daniel. He wanted control of my company, my life. He paid a nurse to administer sedatives and manipulated everyone around me. I almost never woke up." The room was silent. "But someone did fight for you." Olivia's expression softened. She glanced off camera, where Aiden stood in the shadows, one arm still in a sling, watching her with quiet pride. "Yes," she said, voice catching. "Aiden Lee. He wasn't just my doctor. He was my protector, my voice when I had none. He risked everything to uncover the truth, and he brought me back." The anchor raised an eyebrow. "There's been speculation about your relationship with Dr. Lee. Some say it's a PR move, others suggest it's just gratitude." Olivia smiled then. "Not forced, not for cameras. It's not speculation, it's love. I don't need a spin team to tell me who saved my life. I'm here because of him, and I love him. Fiercely, publicly, permanently." The camera froze on her face for a heartbeat before cutting to commercial. But the moment had already ignited. Across the country, viewers watched in stunned silence. Some wiped tears, some reached for their spouse's hand. Because in that moment, Olivia didn't just reclaim her voice. She gave every woman who'd ever been silenced a reason to speak again. Backstage, the studio was buzzing. Producers high-fived, assistants scurried with headsets. The anchor took selfies with her crew, whispering, "That's going viral in an hour." But Aiden didn't move. He stood just out of sight, watching Olivia hand back her mic, her steps slow but confident. She spotted him instantly. "Did I overdo it?" she asked, brushing a curl from her face. He laughed softly. You blew the roof off, Olivia. She reached for his good hand and held it tight. But the world outside was less kind. By the time they reached the car, headlines were already live. Billionaire beauty and the broke doctor. Hero or hustler? Who is Aiden Lee, really? Sleeping with the patient? And the comments? The internet was ruthless. He's riding her fame. She's just lonely. It'll pass. Another gold-digging sob story. Aiden scrolled through the feed on his phone in their apartment that night. The light from the screen reflected in his glasses. Olivia watched him from across the room. He wasn't saying a word. That was the first sign. Aiden, she said softly, setting her tea down. Come here. He didn't. Instead, he stood, set the phone on the table and sighed. Maybe they're right. Her heart twisted. You don't believe that. He turned, pacing. You've got Forbes calling, tech giants wanting interviews, and I'm just a guy trying to pay rent on time. What if I'm holding you back? Olivia crossed the room in 3 steps and grabbed both his hands. Stop. You're not just a guy. You're the man who pulled me out of a darkness no one else even saw. He looked at her, struggling to keep the storm in his chest from spilling out. But what if I'm not enough? She cupped his face, firm but gentle. You're more than enough. But if you ever doubt that again, she smiled, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. Then let me remind you in front of the whole world. Again. The next morning she did. A second press conference. No formal wear, no PR team, just Olivia standing in a park, surrounded by community members and reporters, Aiden beside her. Let me make this simple, she said. This man didn't ask for the spotlight. He didn't want my money. He just wanted me safe. And he loved me when I had nothing. No voice, no power. So if anyone's not worthy here, it's the billion-dollar version of me who couldn't see what really matters, until him. She turned to Aiden, reached for his hand, and kissed it. We are not a product of your approval. We are a product of grace, grit, and something called real love. The crowd was quiet, then applause, real, loud, unapologetic. The headlines quieted, eventually as they always do. The tabloids moved on to newer scandals. The bloggers chased fresher drama. And for the first time in months, Olivia and Aiden found silence. Not the sterile kind of hospital rooms, but the gentle hush of a life finally beginning. They left the penthouse, packed boxes, donated half, kept just enough. Their new home? A narrow brick brownstone tucked away in Astoria, Queens, with creaky floors, a stubborn back door, and a patch of grass out front just big enough for herbs and 2 folding chairs. Aiden stood in the living room on moving thumb, sleeves rolled, dust on his cheek. You sure about this? He asked, grinning. Olivia smirked, barefoot, holding a chipped coffee mug. I've had boardrooms with 12-figure views, but I've never had a place that smells like fresh bread and sounds like laughter. She leaned in, I'm sure. They didn't build a life from marble and chrome. They built it from mornings with mismatched mugs, evenings with vinyl records, and Sunday afternoons folding laundry while watching reruns. But the biggest piece of that life? The Nan Lee Clinic, named after Aiden's mother. A squat, 1-story building on the corner of 95th and Jackson, in a neighborhood the world often forgot. They opened it quietly. No ribbon cuttings, no camera crews, just a hand-painted sign above the door. Come as you are, leave it with hope. Aiden treated coughs, stitched wounds, held the hands of terrified mothers and grateful elders. He walked the halls in sneakers, hoodie over scrubs, heart wide open. Olivia ran the front desk some days. Other days, she met with city reps, pitched donors, rewrote policy grants. She kept the clinic running like an empire, but gentler, warmer. Their staff grew. Volunteers arrived, the walls filled with hand-drawn thank you cards from kids, prayer beads from grandmothers, and faded Polaroids of families they'd helped. At night, they'd return to their brownstone, tired but full. Takeout on the couch, soft music playing. Sometimes they spoke. Sometimes they just sat, hands clasped, souls quiet. One evening, Aiden stood at the clinic's back porch, the autumn breeze lifting his hair. He watched Olivia through the window, laughing with a little girl while fixing a bandage. He pressed a hand to his chest, not in pain, but in disbelief. How did I get here? Not as the hero in a headline, Not as the doctor who saved the millionaire, but as a man who found the kind of love the world can't buy. She joined him outside, her sweater slipping off one shoulder, a steaming mug in her hand. "You thinking again?" she teased. He nodded, pulling her close. "Just wondering how I ever lived without this." She smiled against his shoulder. "You didn't. You waited." Their rhythm wasn't perfect. They argued over grocery lists, burnt pancakes, whether the clinic needed a second waiting room. But every night they returned to each other. Not because life was flawless, but because their love had been tested by fire, frozen in silence, threatened by betrayal, and still survived. They learned that real love doesn't need applause. That healing isn't just medicine, it's presence. And that two broken people can build something unbreakable. It began with a knock, a cold February evening, the kind where snow whispered against the windows and the world slowed to a hush. Olivia was curled on the couch with a book. Aiden was drying dishes, humming off key. Then, three soft knocks at the door. When Olivia opened it, a woman stood trembling in the doorway, wrapped in a thin coat, eyes swollen from tears. And beside her, a little boy. No older than 4, mute, clutching a stuffed bear missing one ear. "I'm sorry to come like this," the woman whispered. "They said, you help people who have nothing left." Her name was Marisol, a mother on the run from a violent husband. The shelters were full, the streets were cruel, the cold could kill. And the boy? His name was Lucas. He hadn't spoken in over 6 months. They didn't ask many questions. Just opened the door. The couch became a bed. The kitchen stretched to feed 4 instead of 2. And their hearts? Well, those had been stretching all along. Weeks passed. Marisol got a job at a bakery 3 blocks away. Lucas didn't speak, but he watched everything. Aiden's careful hands bandaging a scraped knee, Olivia's quiet voice reading bedtime stories. The way they always said, "I'm proud of you," even when he just finished his soup. Then one night, Aiden was putting on his coat to head out for a late shift when he felt a tug on his pant leg. He looked down. Lucas, silent, staring up. Then, a whisper. "Don't go." Aiden's breath caught. He dropped to his knees. "What did you say, buddy?" Lucas blinked, then wrapped his arms around Aiden's neck. Tears filled Aiden's eyes, not just because the boy had finally spoken, but because he realized he wasn't just a doctor who cared. He was becoming someone's safe place. 1 month later, Marisol stood at their front porch, clutching her coat. She was leaving. She'd found her sister in Texas, a place to rebuild, but she couldn't take Lucas. The court would never let her keep custody while fleeing charges she'd never deserved. She cried as she hugged Olivia, whispered 1,000 thank yous, then kissed Lucas's forehead. "They'll love you better than I ever could," she whispered. And just like that, she was gone. That night, Olivia sat beside Lucas's bed, brushing hair from his eyes. Aiden stood in the doorway, his voice low. "So what now?" She looked up. "We stopped waiting for the perfect time." Aiden stepped forward, sitting beside her, and, "Are we ready?" She smiled. "We weren't ready for each other, but we showed up anyway. Let's do it again." And so, they began the process to adopt him. The papers were slow, the meetings endless, but Lucas didn't notice. He had Legos now, and bedtime stories, and Saturday mornings making pancakes that always burned. He had a mom who sang softly while folding laundry, a dad who kissed his forehead even when he scraped his knees, and every night before bed, he whispered a new word: "Thank you." It wasn't the family Olivia imagined. It wasn't the life Aiden planned. But as spring returned and laughter filled their home again, they knew. This was what all the storms had led them to. A love larger than headlines. A life built not on blood, but on choice. Spring arrived like a secret whispered on the wind. The cherry trees along the sidewalk near the clinic bloomed early, their soft pink petals floating down like confetti whenever the breeze sighed. Lucas, now 5, stood outside the Nyanlee clinic in his tiny blue jacket, holding a sign he'd painted himself, his letters crooked but proud: "Free care today, for everyone." Olivia knelt beside him, fixing the strap of his backpack, brushing dirt off his cheek with a mother's touch. Behind them, Aiden unlocked the doors to the clinic, yawning from lack of sleep, but grinning anyway. Today was special. It had started as a crazy idea, a community day, free checkups, food, warm clothes, and resources. No appointments, no forms, no questions asked. Olivia had called every contact she knew. Aiden had trained volunteers, and Lucas had drawn flyers with stars and hearts and a very wobbly stethoscope. They didn't expect much, just a few families, a few smiles, but the line that morning stretched around the block. Inside, the waiting room filled with mothers holding babies, grandfathers with worn shoes, teenagers with hollow eyes and too thin coats. Olivia moved like a current through the room, offering warm muffins and warmer words. Aiden saw 62 patients in 7 hours. He reset a dislocated shoulder. He taught a young girl how to use her inhaler. He removed a splinter the size of a needle from an old man's hand, who cried not from pain, but from kindness. Lucas sat at a corner table drawing pictures and handing them to every visitor. "This is you," he told one tired woman, holding up a stick figure with a superhero cape. She laughed, then cried, then hugged him. As the sun dipped behind the buildings, turning the windows gold, Olivia stepped outside for air and froze. Across the street, a group of city officials had gathered. She recognized one of them, Councilwoman Rhea Barlow, a woman known for her stone face and steel heels. They approached with measured steps, clipboards in hand. Olivia straightened her back. They wouldn't shut her down. Not today. But instead, Rhea smiled, a real quiet smile. "I heard about today," she said, "and I watched." She gestured to the line still waiting, the laughter spilling from the doors, the boy handing out drawings. "This is what every borough needs." Olivia blinked. "You're not here to close us?" Rhea shook her head. "We're here to fund you." The city offered a grant, enough to triple their resources, to bring in more doctors, to open 2 more clinics by next year. Aiden held the letter in his hands that night, disbelief written across his face. "We did this," Olivia whispered beside him. "No," Aiden said softly, watching Lucas sleep with a crayon still clutched in his hand. "He did." A month later, Olivia stood before a crowd in Queen's Park. They'd asked her to speak at a city health initiative launch. Reporters gathered, cameras flashed. But she didn't talk about wealth, or boardrooms, or technology. She talked about a boy who didn't speak for 6 months. She talked about a doctor who defied a rule to save a life. She talked about the power of staying, even when the world said you didn't belong. "We weren't born into this mission," she said, her voice unwavering. "We chose it, and we'll keep choosing it, every single day, not because it's easy, but because it matters." The crowd stood to their feet in silence, then roared into applause. That night, back at home, Lucas curled up between them on the couch, a blanket over his lap, a bowl of popcorn in his arms. He looked up with sleepy eyes. "Mom?" Olivia turned, her heart already softening. "Yeah, baby? Do superheroes wear hoodies and glasses?" Aiden choked on his popcorn, laughing. "Some do," Olivia smiled. "Some even forget to do the dishes." Lucas giggled, burying his face in her side. They had saved each other. One act of defiance, one second chance, one quiet miracle at a time. And now they were building something bigger than themselves. Not a fortune, not a legacy, but a home for everyone. It began with a knock, not the kind that demanded attention, but the kind that whispered. A hesitant, hollow sound against the glass door of the clinic just after closing time. Olivia glanced up from her desk, frowning. Aiden was in the back, restocking supplies. Lucas was already curled up on a cot in the break room, his toy lion clutched to his chest. Outside, the sun had set, casting long shadows across the street. The last of the orange glow clung to the skyline, and the neighborhood was quiet. The knock came again. This time, Olivia stood. She reached the door slowly, switching on the outside light, and her breath caught. It was her father, Robert Nyan, older, grayer, the signature navy trench coat still pressed sharp across his shoulders, the faint smell of aftershave she remembered from childhood clinging to the air even through the glass. He looked just like he had the day he walked out of her hospital room, the day he told the board Olivia was not fit to return, the day he sided with Daniel. She didn't move. Neither did he. A beat passed, then another. Then she unlocked the door. It opened with a slow creak. "What do you want?" Olivia's voice didn't shake. "Not anymore." Robert studied her face with eyes that had once intimidated CEOs. Now they softened. To say I was wrong. She blinked. The words didn't make sense. Not coming from the man who once told her emotions were a liability in leadership. The man who turned his back when she needed him most. Too late, she said quietly. But he stepped forward, not asking permission. I watched the press conference when he said, the trial, the clinic, all of it. I didn't think you'd come back from what Daniel did. He paused, the weight of age sagging on his shoulders now. But you didn't just come back, you rebuilt. You inspired a city. His voice cracked. You became everything I failed to be. Behind her, Aiden appeared in the hallway, sensing something was off. He paused, seeing the man. Olivia raised a hand gently, not yet. Robert turned toward him. You must be Aiden. Aiden nodded once, cautious. You saved her. For that, I owe you more than I can say. Aiden didn't speak. He just watched Olivia, waiting for her cue. She stared at her father for a long, aching moment. So much was unsaid. So much never would be. But something had shifted in him, and something in her had let go too. Maybe it wasn't about forgiveness. Maybe it was about release. I'm not the daughter you left behind, Olivia said softly. And this isn't your empire anymore. Robert smiled faintly. I know. Then he reached into his coat pocket and handed her a letter. I'm leaving the country. But I couldn't go without saying goodbye. He turned to Aiden, extending a hand. Take care of her. Aiden finally reached out, firm and steady. Always. And then Robert Nyan walked into the shadows of the city, alone. He had come not to reclaim the past, but to give it peace. Back inside, Olivia stood at the window for a long time. Aiden moved to her side. You okay? She nodded slowly. It didn't fix anything, she murmured. But it doesn't have to. I'm not carrying it anymore. She turned to him, her eyes clear. We've got our future. That's all I need. Outside, the moon rose over Queens. Inside, the light stayed on a little longer. Because healing doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers. And sometimes it tunquoish just once on a quiet door at the end of a long day. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. It was tucked neatly in a cream envelope, embossed with the silver crest of the Nexus Health Initiative, a national nonprofit known for building medical centers in underserved communities. Olivia almost tossed it in the pile of donation requests until she saw the signature at the bottom. Dr. Evelyn Crane, a name she hadn't heard in over a decade. She opened it slowly, her eyes scanning the letter. By the time she finished, she was standing completely still, her pulse quickening. Aiden walked in carrying coffee. You look like you've seen a ghost, he said, setting the cups down. She handed him the letter wordlessly, his brow furrowed as he read. Then, they want us to lead it? She nodded. Co-directors, national expansion. They want to model clinics across the country based on ours. Aiden exhaled, lowering the paper. That's incredible. Oh, it's everything we dreamed of, Olivia said, then softer. But it's not just a clinic anymore, Aiden. It's us, our home. That night, they sat on the back steps of the clinic, shoulders brushing. The air was warm, cicadas humming in the trees. Olivia traced the rim of her coffee cup, deep in thought. If we say yes, we'd be traveling constantly, coordinating, delegating. Aiden nodded. We'd barely see patients, barely see each other. But we could help thousands. He looked at her. And who helps the ones here? The silence between them wasn't cold. It was heavy with love and fear. Aiden's voice broke it. You know what scares me the most? She glanced at him. That we'll forget why we started. She leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. Then we don't forget. We remember every day. The next morning, they called a meeting. Nurses, volunteers, patients who'd become family. Olivia stood at the front of the community room, sunlight filtering through the tall windows. She told them the truth about the offer, about the vision, and about the Christendom. Then she asked the question that mattered most. Do you think we're ready? An elderly woman at the back raised her hand. Mrs. Douglas, a widow they had treated 3 times for pneumonia. You saved my life when I couldn't afford a dime, she said. If you can give that to more people, do it. Just promise you won't forget where you came from. Applause followed, and tears. Olivia reached for Aiden's hand. and he squeezed it. They knew the answer. Later that week, they signed the partnership, but with one condition. The original clinic would stay, their roots would remain in Queens, and every clinic after it would carry the same principle, carved on the plaque at the front door. No one forgotten, no one alone. Over the next months, their lives changed again. From Arizona deserts to Mississippi Delta towns, the Dawson Lee clinics began to appear, each with a garden out front, each staffed by people who cared like family. And yet, every 2 weeks, Olivia and Aiden flew home, back to Queens, back to where it all began. Because some dreams grow, but the best ones, they return home, stronger. It was a Thursday evening, and the clinic had just closed. Rain pattered softly against the windows. Olivia was inside tallying patient records. Aiden was finishing a phone call with a supplier. Outside, the sky turned pewter gray, heavy with the weight of an early autumn storm. Then, a knock. 3 sharp raps against the glass door at the front. Aiden frowned. No one came this late. He opened the door slowly. A boy stood there, soaked, thin. No more than 15, his hoodie clung to his frame, his sneakers squished with water. But what struck Aiden most, what stopped his heart cold, was the boy's face. The jawline, the eyes, the way he held his shoulders, like looking in a mirror from 15 years ago. "You okay, kid?" Aiden asked gently. The boy nodded but didn't speak. Olivia had come to the door behind him, brows furrowed. "Do you need help?" Finally, the boy's voice cracked through the quiet. "I'm looking for Dr. Aiden Lee." Aiden knelt to his level, heart pounding. "That's me." The boy blinked, his eyes glassy. "My name's Jamie." A beat, then, "My mom, she said you might be my father." The air left the room like a punctured balloon. Aiden staggered slightly, blinking as if he'd been slapped. Olivia's hand reached for his arm, grounding him. But Aiden, he couldn't move, couldn't think. All he could see was the boy's face. All he could hear was the echo of a long-buried night from med school and a woman named Kara. Back then it had been brief, a few months. Sweet, but complicated. They'd gone their separate ways when Aiden transferred hospitals. There had been no follow-up, no phone call, no letter, just silence. Now the silence had grown up and stood dripping at his door. Aiden swallowed hard, motioning the boy inside. "Let's get you warm." Jamie sat by the heater, sipping cocoa. Olivia wrapped a blanket around him while Aiden sat nearby, heart still thundering. "Where's your mom now?" Olivia asked softly. "She passed away last spring," Jamie said, voice barely a whisper. "She got sick. Before she died, she gave me an envelope. It had your name on it, said if I ever needed someone, to find you." Aiden blinked back the sting in his eyes. "I didn't know," he said, voice cracking. Jamie looked up. "Neither did I, not until she told me." They sat in stunned silence. The clinic, once so familiar, now felt like foreign territory. Olivia squeezed Aiden's hand under the table, her voice calm but firm. "We'll figure this out. Together." That night, Aiden lay awake in bed. Jamie slept in the guest room down the hall, and Olivia sat beside him, her hand in his hair as the rain whispered against the windows. "I don't know how to do this," Aiden admitted. "You don't have to," she whispered. "Not alone. Because some surprises don't break your world. They open it wider." The morning after Jamie arrived, the sky was clear, but inside Aiden's chest, clouds still churned. He stood at the kitchen counter, staring into his coffee like it held answers. Jamie was still asleep upstairs, his breathing soft and even. Olivia sat at the table quiet, letting Aiden take it all in. "I need to know for sure," he finally said. "Not because I doubt him, but because if I am his father, I need to do this right." That afternoon, they drove to a private clinic across town. No press, no records connected to St. Augustine's. The DNA test was quick, clinical. Cotton swabs, sealed envelopes. But the waiting? That was agonizing. 3 days passed. Jamie barely spoke. He stayed mostly in the guest room, sketching in a small, tattered notebook. Olivia tried to reach him, offering warm meals, gentle questions. But he was guarded, quiet, not angry, just unsure, just like Aiden. On the 4th day, the results arrived. Aiden opened the envelope in the clinic's office while Olivia and Jamie waited outside. His hand shook. 99.98% probability of paternity. It was there in black and white. Jamie was his son. He stared at the words, blinking back tears that threatened to fall. The air felt thinner. He wasn't just Dr. Aiden Lee anymore. He was Dad. He stepped into the hallway, eyes locking on Olivia's first. She stood and approached, lips parting, hope flickering in her gaze. Aiden nodded once. He's mine. Her arms were around him in seconds. Then he turned to Jamie. The boy stood, his sketchbook clutched to his chest like armor. Aiden knelt down to eye level. Jamie, I'm your dad. I didn't know. If I had, I swear, I would have found you. I'm sorry. Jamie stared for a moment. Then slowly he pulled something from the sketchbook and handed it over. A pencil drawing, rough but full of heart. It was Aiden, asleep in a chair beside a hospital bed, beside Olivia, watching over them both. Aiden's throat tightened. Jamie's voice was barely above a whisper. Mom said you were brave. Aiden swallowed the lump in his throat, reaching out. Jamie hesitated, then stepped forward, falling into his arms. It was clumsy, new, but it was real. They went home that night in silence, but a different kind of silence. Not the absence of words, the presence of something just beginning. That evening, they sat at the dinner table, Olivia across from Aiden, Jamie beside him. 3 people, a new shape, a new family. And when Jamie looked up and asked, "Can I stay here for good?" Aiden's voice didn't waver. Yes, for as long as you want. The next morning was slow, quiet, the kind of silence that comes not from emptiness, but from unfamiliar peace. Aiden stood in the kitchen making scrambled eggs, burning them just slightly the way Olivia liked. Jamie sat at the table, head buried in a book about constellations. So, you like stars? Aiden asked, turning the eggs. Jamie shrugged. They're quiet, they don't change. Aiden paused, spatula in hand. Maybe not to the eye, but stars? They change all the time, just really, really slow. Jamie didn't reply, but a small smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth. Later that day, they went to a bookstore. Aiden's idea. Jamie walked in like he'd just stepped into a church, eyes wide, reverent. He didn't ask for anything. Just wandered the aisles, fingers skimming spines. Aiden watched from a distance, heart swelling with a quiet pride he hadn't known he could feel. They stopped at a park on the way home. Jamie climbed the jungle gym, not saying much. Olivia sat on the bench, a blanket over her legs, watching. He's carrying more than we see, she said softly. Aiden nodded. I'm trying, but it feels like he's testing the water. He's not testing it, Olivia said, looking up at him. He's hoping it's real. That night, Jamie knocked on Aiden's office door. Can you help me with my math? Aiden blinked, surprised, then nodded, pulling out a chair. Jamie opened his notebook, flipping to a page full of numbers. They leaned over it together, shoulders almost touching. Aiden didn't have all the answers, but he didn't leave Jamie to figure it out alone. And that was enough. Days passed and a rhythm formed. Breakfast with burnt toast, afternoons helping Olivia at the clinic, evenings with books, board games, and slowly shared memories. Jamie began calling Olivia Liv, his way of trying her on like a new coat. And he called Aiden. Nothing. Until one day he dropped his fork at dinner and muttered without thinking, Dad, can you? He froze, Aiden's heart caught. Jamie stared at his plate, cheeks flushed. Sorry, I didn't mean, but Aiden reached across the table and touched his hand. You can call me that anytime you want. Jamie nodded, didn't say more, but the next morning he did it again. And this time he didn't flinch. Later that week, Aiden found a crumpled sketch in the trash. It was a drawing of the 3 of them, Aiden, Olivia, and Jamie sitting on a couch. Jamie was between them, smiling. At the top, in Jamie's messy scrawl, my family. Aiden didn't throw it away, he framed it. They weren't perfect. There were nights Jamie woke up from nightmares and refused to say why. Days when he shut down and wouldn't speak. But Aiden didn't push. He stayed. He showed up. And sometimes just being there was the greatest act of love a man could give. It was a rainy afternoon, the kind that wrapped around the city like a soft gray quilt. Olivia was in the attic searching for an old photo album Jamie had asked about. Dust danced in the light as she opened boxes one by one. Then she found it, a thin envelope at the bottom of a worn leather journal. Her name was written on it in her own handwriting, but it wasn't addressed to her. It was from her, to Aiden. She froze, and then she remembered. Months ago, back when she was barely able to speak, behind him, saw me say, when her hands trembled from the strain of waking up. She had written a letter. Late at night, unsure if she'd even make it another week. She'd wanted to tell Aiden everything, but fear had held her back. She never gave him the letter. And now here it was. Downstairs, Aiden was helping Jamie with a science project, something about the phases of the moon. Olivia stood silently at the edge of the room, the letter clutched in her hand. "Can we talk?" she asked. Aiden turned, sensing the shift in her voice. He nodded, sending Jamie upstairs. When they sat at the kitchen table, Olivia slid the envelope across to him. "I wrote this before I knew if I'd live. I didn't think I'd have the courage to say it out loud." Aiden picked it up slowly, hands trembling more than they should have. He unfolded the paper and began to read. "Aiden, if you're reading this, it means I either found courage or I'm gone. I don't know what you see when you look at me. I only know what I feel when I hear your voice. Like I'm tethered to something real for the first time in my life. You sat by my side when I was nothing but silence and stillness. You changed my bandages when no one else dared. You fought for me. I don't know what this is between us, but it's the only thing that's ever felt true. If I wake up and I'm still afraid, please don't give up on me. Love, Olivia." When he finished, Aiden's eyes were glistening. "You thought I'd need a letter to understand how you felt?" She looked down, cheeks flushed. "Back then, I wasn't sure you'd even be here to read it." Aiden reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. "I was always going to be here." She smiled through the tears. "And I still am," he said. "Not just as your doctor or your partner, but everything in between." That night, Olivia placed the letter in a shadow box on their bedroom shelf, next to the photo of the clinic's opening day and the drawing Jamie had made. It wasn't a confession anymore. It was history. And history, when honored, became the strongest part of their foundation. The sky was painted in soft hues of rose and lavender as dawn crept over the brownstone neighborhood. Aiden stirred in bed, the early light slipping through the sheer curtains. For the first time in weeks, he'd slept in. No clinic emergencies, no overnight research shifts, just silence. Until he smelled pancakes and bacon. And was that glitter? He sat up, rubbing his eyes. The scent wafted up the stairs, warm and sweet like memories of childhood. He followed it downstairs and stopped short in the doorway. The kitchen was chaos. Flour coated the counters. A carton of eggs was cracked, some in the bowl, others not so lucky. Pancake batter dripped from a whisk held by none other than Jamie, who wore an oversized apron with the words, "World's Best Assistant Chef," scribbled across it in purple marker. Olivia stood behind her, holding up a tiny handmade banner that read, "Happy Father's Day, Dr. Dad." Aiden's heart stilled. Jamie looked up, her face lighting up. "Surprise, we made breakfast. I only burned 3 pancakes this time." Aiden smiled, blinking back sudden tears. "This is amazing." They sat at the kitchen table, the 3 of them. The pancakes were lopsided, the bacon slightly overcooked, and the orange juice had seeds floating in it. But it was perfect. Between bites, Jamie reached into a paper bag and handed Aiden a small box, wrapped in old comic book pages. "This is from both of us." Inside was a stethoscope, but not just any stethoscope. The chest piece was engraved, "To the man who heard my mom's heartbeat before she even woke up. Love, Jay." Aiden didn't speak for a long moment. He couldn't. When he looked up, Olivia reached for his hand. Jamie smiled, a little unsure. "You like it?" "I love it," he whispered hoarsely. "More than anything." Later that day, they went to the park, just the 3 of them. Jamie ran ahead to the swings while Aiden and Olivia walked slowly beneath the trees. She watched him as he laughed with Jamie, pushing her higher and higher. "You know," she said softly, "you're already everything she ever needed in a father. You didn't need a title." Aiden looked back at her, his eyes tender. "Maybe, but today, she gave it to me anyway." That night, after Jamie had gone to bed, Aiden found Olivia on the porch, wrapped in a light shawl. He pulled her close and kissed her temple. "Thank you," he murmured, "for giving me more than I ever knew I needed." She leaned into him, smiling. "We didn't give you anything, Aiden. You earned it." And as the stars shimmered above, in a city that never truly slept, a little girl dreamed, a mother healed, and a man who had once been just a doctor now belonged to a family. A real one. The air was cool with a touch of early autumn, the kind that whispered promises of change and quiet beginnings. Above the brownstone, the night sky unfolded in velvet blue, speckled with stars that blinked like distant memories. Aiden stood in the backyard, the grass soft beneath his bare feet. He looked up, exhaling slowly. The clinic had closed hours ago. Jamie had fallen asleep with a book in her hands, curled up like a kitten in her room. And Olivia, she was inside, finishing a letter that would soon be published in the New York Times. A letter not about her wealth, not about the courtroom drama, but about the journey of waking up. Not just from a coma, but from a life that had lost its soul. He heard the door creak and turned. There she was. Olivia stepped out onto the porch, wrapped in a navy shawl, her dark hair loose and dancing in the breeze. "You always find your way out here," she said, her voice soft. "It's quiet here," Aiden replied, smiling faintly. "It reminds me that we survived." She descended the steps and stood beside him, both of them looking at the stars. "Sometimes," she whispered, "I still wonder how it all happened. How I didn't just lose everything, but found everything that mattered." He reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining. "Because you fought," he said, "even when you didn't realize you were." "No," she murmured, her eyes shining. "You were the one who fought. For me, for the truth, for Jamie." Aiden shook his head gently. "We both did, just from opposite sides of the silence." They stood that way for a while, no need for words. The stars above weren't just stars anymore. They were witnesses of pain, of recovery, of love blooming in the most unlikely of places. Then Olivia reached into her shawl pocket and pulled out something small, something silver. She pressed it into his palm. A compass, his old compass. "You once told me this always pointed you home," she said. "But I realized something. You're not the one who needed it anymore." He looked at the worn edges, the way the needle still spun before finding north. "You're giving it back?" he asked. She shook her head slowly. "I'm giving it to you, again, because now we're each other's home." Aiden swallowed hard, emotion pressing at his chest. He didn't say thank you. He didn't have to. Instead, he slipped the compass into his pocket, then pulled her into his arms. Under the stars, where their story began, where it would continue. 1 year later, the Nyan Lee Foundation funded its 10th rural clinic. Olivia now spoke at schools about women in tech and surviving betrayal. Aiden taught young doctors how to listen, not just to hearts, but to silence. Jamie had her own room in the brownstone. Her drawing of Dr. Dad and Supermom hung proudly above the fireplace. And the compass? It rested on a shelf above the doorway, always pointing inward, because home wasn't a place anymore. It was them.